Okay,
And a chance to talk. I can go ahead and introduce you. Your name is, of course, Walt Fritz.
please do.
And one of the things I wanted to say is you're one of the educators I like taking classes with. You and I had a pretty strong bond. From my vantage point, I was not only able to contact you on Facebook and like ask a simple question about class, but you were willing to engage with me just a little bit, questions beforehand. And then when I took class, my respect for you grew even more because I realized you weren't just giving simple, pat answers when it came to things related to essentially what I think of as pain science at this point. You had a good knowledge base of like, well, what does research studies say? And what are the unknowns? And you didn't seem willing to compromise on those. It's like, well, here's what we know, and this is the limits. There's a ton of stuff we need to still ask questions and do research about. That was one of the reasons I really enjoyed taking class with you. And I felt in some ways that your stance on things was, in a way, sort of revolutionary to the massage industry because it wasn't just saying, oh, well, we change fascia or we, just make up things related to what actually happens when we do massage, body work, or manual therapy. So it's great to have you on. It's great to interview you and talk with you. And I thought maybe in the beginning we could just have you talk a little bit about your history and background and how you got into what you do with myofascial release.
Thanks for having me, Robert. Yeah, we've known each other now for a couple of years, both in person as well as online over dinner, et cetera, et cetera. And I've kind of enjoyed the dialogue. You and I, we teach and practice seemingly pretty disparate modalities, Thai massage, myofascial release, but I think that there's that commonness of bond that we've established that you know what, there's only so many things we can do under the skin, and it's how we approach it and how we talk about it that's important. So I think it's been cool knowing you, and as well as having the ability to engage with you as well. So briefly, I'm Walt Fritz. I'm a physical therapist from New York State. Been licensed for way too many years, since 1985. Been a student, if you will, of myofascial release, manual therapy, craniosacral therapy, and some of those iterations of it since about 1992. Studied with John Barnes for a lot of the years, worked for John for about 10 years at his seminars, and that's kind of where I got my start in what I know through mediums that I have that I use with my hands. I have a lot of gratitude to the people who taught that to me. I, like a lot of people, kind of move on from things. I moved on to hopefully cleaner, more accurate narratives. When I talk about narratives, I'm talking about how we explain the work we do, how we both think of it in our heads, how we teach it to patients, and I think more importantly, how we teach it to each other. You talked about some of the things that are considered sort of the holy grails in our each of our therapies, as well as all of the other modalities out there. Each one seems to have this secret, close to explain what's wrong with the person, as well as how we intervene on that person based on this rather closed society type of science that each one claims ownership of. Myofascial release, the way I learned it was all about the body is consisting of this fascial sweater, which is indisputable that the sweater exists, or at least that the three-dimensional nature of fascia exists. But then they start drifting a little bit afar to say, well, you can't detect fascia with testing devices, MRI, et cetera. Therefore, it's up to us to find it, and not only find the problem, but then come up with the so-called solution, which is fun as a taker, as a learner of myofascial release, because you think you've got a lot of special skills. But it's tough to talk to people out there about it, right? The doctors, other therapists, because you're talking about things that they don't know exists, and it becomes very difficult. So as I transitioned in 2005 from some of the previous schools that I worked with and for into trying to develop my own take on this, I've learned a lot of really good things on what might be happening under the skin, as well as some interesting things that might be happening within the skin itself. And I use a lot of different narratives to explain the work that I do, from a skin-based neurology, from a neurodynamic technique, both cutaneous, peripheral, and central nerves of dysfunction, as well as some of the things that people don't like always hearing about the placebo effects of our work, about the contextual factors that exist when we see people for therapy, that may play a massive role in the outcomes that we see with our patients. But yet we're sort of all schooled that it's all about these skills that we have as a fascial therapist or a Thai massage therapist. And I think we end up working too much from our ego versus integrating the patient's preference, the patient's belief, and the patient's experience into the model. So over the past couple of years, that's really become who I've been about, less about fascia, less about myofascia, and more about of care.
Yeah, yeah. There's so many, you say it in a way that I always the same verbiage, but there's just this connection. And when I first started talking to you and took a class, there were so many pieces that I was like, oh, that's good. I like that because it shifted the dynamic. When I talk to students sometimes in Thai massage circles, they're looking for a sequence, a flowing routine to perform on all the clients. And I use a sequence just to get them
Mm-hmm.
started. And then I'm
Mm-hmm.
basically trying to explain to them that if I give Walt a session, I have to improvise a session for Walt based on his preferences, based on the amount of pressure he can receive, based on what his condition is, meaning what's going on with his hip. And the thing is, they're looking for an
Mm-hmm.
exact answer, do this all the time. And not only from a language perspective did I not like it, but it didn't feel like it honored the client enough and what their specific needs in that connection were.
Yeah, yeah, and I think we're in total agreement there. And sometimes when I use the word recipes, I think people feel that they're being insulted. That they're learning a protocol-based work, which some people do learn protocol-based work. But even the modalities and the teachers who say no, this is completely whole body in the moment, spontaneous for every person, they still utilize a recipe of thought and action. I learned a recipe which basically says you got to get to the emotions behind that fascial restriction before the person can truly heal. And it was a recipe that's the recipe at the emotions, so to speak. We learn recipes, but the recipe to me is meaningless. It's just doing a whole bunch of stuff to a person unless that person finds meaning from it. It's their preference, but it's what they believe will help too.
Yeah.
There's people that you and I see who want us to bury their elbows in them because they think that's what they need. Other people, the light pressure of my hand might be too much. Now, I'm not willing to exceed my belief in safety in either direction. I've learned that it's really important that I meet this person somewhere in the middle where their expectations are being met, or my outcomes will probably diminish as a result of that. A lot of the pain science that's coming out there, and even in evidence-based practice, it's about patient expectation, and I think that we really diminish that in a lot of ways in a lot of the manual therapy training that I've taken and that's available both to both PTs, massage therapists, et cetera, which is a shame, but a lot of the new approaches coming out really do address that. The biopsych is embracing our world a bit more and really recognizing that it's much more than the biomechanical things that we thought were so important and that I was trained were so important. It's about the psychological factors as well as the social dynamic between us as well as that patient and their community and their family, and how pain and movement dysfunction affects that positively and negatively.
Yeah. There's so many variables. The students want a reduction of variables, to make it easy.
Mm-hmm.
Do it this way. And the thing is, to me, it's like going to a party and figuring out who do you connect with and have a good conversation.
Right.
There's just as many variables when we're dealing with clients, to me,
Sure.
about what people are looking for. And even the context, when you talk about the context, I would add to it that like our marketing, the materials on our website or social media, the sort of service that we're selling to the public even starts to dictate what kind of outcomes do we get. Because if they're expecting the elbow and heavy
Yeah.
pressure, They have a completely different expectation. So even from a marketing stance, when you're just dealing with interacting with the client before you've actually seen them in a room, you're already laying the framework
Right.
for whatever that narrative is.
Right, right. And I love the concept of narrative and narrative medicine, and I use it a lot in my trainings. I use it a lot with my patients. I listen to their narrative first. What's your story? What happened to you? And I like people to tell me things in ways that they're not trying to make it make sense to me, but they're trying to tell me their story the way they see it, and then I can better understand where they're coming from, and maybe, to a certain extent, align what I do and say to that narrative. The interesting thing is, ever since I kind of, in the middle 2000s, some of those myofascial release beliefs and started training and learning from some other people, I also had the ability or the opportunity to sort of take an overview, and a lot of it came through social media, to take an overview of what other people think, what other therapists are trained to believe and trained to think they're doing. And, both in terms of the tissues we think we're affecting under the skin, right? The fascia, the muscle, the joint, the bone, et cetera, which is real anatomy. But then moving into pathologies that we think we're addressing, everything from scar tissue, et cetera, which can be viewed as real pathologies, into what I'm going to call fascial restrictions, trigger points, cranial lesions, those sorts of things, which really, I know that I ruffle some feathers when I say things like that, but there's not a lot of credible evidence to think that they exist beyond this inner club that we all belong to with our modality circles. The perceived modalities, I think when we talk about that to a patient, we run the risk of adding additional thought of patient, meaning the doctor said, this is wrong with me. Well, this previous therapist said, I've got the worst trigger points they ever saw. The next therapist said, I've got an emotional holding pattern. It's like, well, what do you think, Walt? And, I try to avoid answering the questions in a way that adds even more pathology to this poor person's brain. How do you walk away from somebody saying you've got the worst trigger points I've ever felt my entire career, thinking there's a potential that you can get better? I think those are nocebo effects, right? The things that plant the seed to actually make things worse and maybe harder to get better. So I really strive to not stay within each of the camps and speak from those languages. I can acknowledge the languages. I just don't believe all of them. Patient comes in to see me, I'm going to try and not add additional pathology to that person's brain. Let's say, what can we do to get you moving better? What can we get you to feeling less pain? And we could talk about some of the things along the way. I'm not going to act stupid the whole time and say I don't know what might be going on, but I know enough not to lie to you. I know enough not to tell you one additional story that may make it harder to end.
Yeah.
It's fun stuff, really. It's frustrating stuff for therapists. We want to be given the Holy Grail, right? What's wrong with this person? And a lot of, I ruffle some feathers with this, but a lot of people teaching our shared works are offering the Holy Grail to people. And by the way, the Holy Grail costs a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of devotion to your home camp there, right? Yeah. And it's heady stuff, and people get caught up in these modality empires, and it's hard to see your way out. I learned in a modality empire, I really did, and I learned good hands-on. I don't think I learned the best narrative. I don't think science to support, but I came away, and I'm better for it, and now kind of creating my own narrative.
The whole thing is, like, from a scientist's perspective, and I don't consider myself a scientist, but when I think about science as a path of questioning and a path of finding out more information about our world, we have a vested interest in continuing to question the things that we think, which means that science and manual therapists like ourselves, we have to continue to evolve as the science evolves.
And not be afraid to ask the questions, right? That's the intro, Robert. When you start asking questions within your own camp, you get ostracized, you get bullied, you get humiliated, or you get kicked out, And, I can attest all of those because they all happen. And I see it happening all the time on Facebook. I mean, so right now, Facebook is to me the number one engagement when it comes to therapists and the groups, both the general groups of our various professions, but then the camps of an educator side, and you have to conform to certain behavior, or boop, you're out of there. I get that, right? I mean, it's their ball; they can take it and leave if they want. But I find that really troubling. That asking questions is a challenge. I think asking questions is good. I love when people say, "You know what? You're full of crap." I don't believe it. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, there are groups where you're allowed to ask questions, and one of the things that I was really interested in addition, because I can't speak as authoritatively about manual therapy and science as say you could, or maybe Diane Jacobs, who's part of the dermo-neuromodulating group. But I was really interested in entrepreneurship. And we've made a lot of waves and massage entrepreneurs because the way I set up the group is admin. I was like, listen, you can ask all the questions, you can debate. I mean, really debate. Just don't call people names. And occasionally, every 6 months or so, we hit a topic that the group explodes, people get angry.
Yeah.
And it's like, listen, debate, it's fine. We can vehemently disagree, but I protect your right to be able to say things that I don't agree with. And I will not call you names. But I was also a former philosophy student. So I understand the value of debate and that clash of ideas. And the thing is, you have to have that to have any real change. It doesn't just happen softly, in my experience.
Yeah. People tend to, when you're challenged, you think of it as a personal insult, a personal assault against you, when it's really just questioning your beliefs and being. I know firsthand, back in the middle 2000s, I was involved with a rather infamous now debate. I was on the defending myofascial release side, and I was going against some neurologically inclined folks who were deconstructing my modality, and I took it very personally, and I acted in a lot of ways in an inexcusable way. Never really listening to what people were saying, but it was more about me trying to get my jabs in when they it was one of my great embarrassments, as well as my great turning points. I still look back at that Soma Simple debate of 2005, 2006. And I still go back there once in a while. I read through the things that I'm a little embarrassed that I said or ways that I acted, but I also read the things that people offered me. Some of the neurologically inclined manual therapists who were giving me science and ways to see the body, see our touch, see our presence in the room with the persons in a way that myofascial release hadn't taught me that. And that was pivotal for me. Unfortunately, when people go to Soma Simple, they read that great conversation and they don't see the aftermath of it. I have an aftermath thread that my mea culpa to everybody on there and everybody else before I share it, because after that debate, which was pretty ugly, came a huge period of turmoil in my professional career and transitioning to really seeing things from maybe not, I'm not going to say the right narratives, the right answers, but ones that might be less wrong. Okay, from a scientific hierarchy of proof, nothing is totally wrong and nothing is totally right, but some things tend to be less wrong than others. And again, it may sound I'm coming from ego right now, but I like to think myself a little less wrong than I was 10, 15 years ago.
That's what science is. It's less wrong over time. The thing is, we don't, as humans, we just do not know enough about the inner landscape of what's going on in our bodies. They're still finding, new information. Like it was in the last 6 months, they discovered like some people have an additional muscle in their quad. Now it's the quints. Little things like that do change over time. It's just our responsibility to be able to ask questions and to be able just to try to remain supple enough to evolve as the science evolves.
Right. What I just find fascinating, I'm going to go off on my little tangent here, whether we touch with a static touch, whether we touch with a movement-based touch, whether we're working dry, working wet, we're basically essentially doing almost the same thing. You and I, you and the next person, the group of physical therapists who do manual therapy, massage therapists, etc. we're basically touching in a way to cause somebody to feel better, but yet I just find it both troubling and fascinating how many different ways people interpret that touch, that pressure, the actions here at the skin, the actions deeper into the structure, right? Bone, trigger point, muscle, et cetera, et cetera. And you know, how what we then think we're resolving, and it's both fascinating because everybody believes that, and it's troubling because everybody believes all these different things. You know, that's the, you know, variety makes the world what it is. But I do think there probably are less wrong things that people say, and you know, I honor and respect what you've learned and what you teach. But if I challenge you a bit about it, to get mad if you challenge me on my stuff.
Yeah. Students in my classes, when I started with Thai massage is based on Thai medical theory, which includes a system of energy lines called send lines. Now, the way that I interpret
Mm-hmm.
those lines is a little different than I see with most teachers with a more classically trained background. What I was doing was using it as a starting off point, and there's a line that say goes through the forearm here. And when I go through towards the wrist, I'd go, "Oh, this is open. Ooh, wait, what's this? This is the frozen chicken, Walt." But the frozen chicken was
Yeah.
on the line, and you learned to work this portion, and almost miraculously, the person felt better. The sin lines were just a simple map. I didn't make this into something you dissect people and find it. It's not a magic line. But even 7 years
Mm-hmm.
later, I'm still getting students because of that first workbook. They keep asking those questions, and I go, okay, so what about myofascial release? What about trigger point therapy? What about pain science? What about subcutaneous nerves? And they're
Yep.
like, what is it? And I'm
Yep.
like, okay, in the end, we're going to continue to ask these rational questions. When you work with a client for now, what I'm going to tell you is this:
Right.
how do they feel?
Yep. Yep.
Me, right
And
now, that's the most important piece. It's not about technique and it's not about necessarily what we're doing. It's about
right.
how does the client feel while we're doing it.
Right. Because to me, what we're doing is it's just the entry point. It's ringing a doorbell to that person's awareness, right? You may find that tightness along a sun line. I used to think that this was a fascia restriction, and now you spoiled my thunder. It's the frozen chicken. I call it frozen chicken for a lot of reasons, so I don't add pathology to my person's brain, but it's an acknowledgement of the thousands of things we say it when we touch that stuff that we're so good at touching, and yet then we each go down our separate little road to say, oh, that's the fascia restriction, we need to do this with it. And then when I come in and just touch it and put pressure on it, somebody waits for me to release the fascia. Well, to me it's like that's may not be what's happening. I think the important piece is that I made a connection to your nervous system, to your sensation that you recognize as relevant. Patient model that I use, not about this itself, because even though we want it to feel different over time, it may never change. But I'm looking for the perception to change. That's really, we're looking for our patients to move easier, to have less pain. That's really what it is. And I think our own perception of our performance and what's happening is we come back later and say, oh, this feels so much better. But we have no objective way to know that. And to me, it doesn't matter. What matters is the patient feels better. They want our validation. They want to hear that, oh, that feels so much better. I try not to give it to them. I'll try to avoid the question because it really feeds, I think, those unhealthy, those unrealistic narratives. But I'm not going to deny them what they're looking for out of my experience. But I'd rather redirect it and say, well, what do you feel, right? What do you feel when I hit that point right there that you say is a little tender, but is it tender in a way that's familiar, which is what I want to do. I want to connect with relevance at all times. And I certainly don't want to connect with something that you tell me, it's like, well, that's not familiar, but oh, I didn't know that was there. We better do something about that. That's not good. Manual therapy, trying to sell your patient something, and I try to avoid that at all possible.
There was a point in my practice where, as my skill set developed, I would occasionally work with someone, and it was one of those sessions where it almost felt miraculous, like you healed someone.
Mm-hmm.
They had a long-standing pain issue.
Mm-hmm.
You interacted with them, they got better, and I began to almost get addicted to that sense of like, can I help someone to that degree? Can I help someone to that degree? And then when I couldn't after the
The
session,
ego. Yeah. Yep.
I felt
Yep.
like a failure. And then it shifted for me, even from a Thai massage tradition of
Yeah.
like Buddhism. It's like, no, 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 no. It's not about healing someone, and it's not about, all these little things and stories we can make up. It's really about this fundamentally. And I think it relates to sort of a Theravada and maybe Buddhist tradition. What you're doing is you're bringing the person's
Yeah.
awareness to something.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not about changing it. It's about making
No.
them aware of something. Yeah.
Self-empowerment too. That you know what? It didn't happen without you in a way, because we touched and they felt, but not to make you that quote unquote healer that some of us I think like to wear that cloak of a healer, but it's about bringing the awareness to that area. And I do think from some of the science that can support this work, if you're willing to look outside your own modality, there's a lot of for why your sensation positive effect, why seeing that the potential for having less pain allows you to move differently. Why do we get changes that last? Well, it used to be, that's a great question. Everybody has an answer to that question, right? What is it that we do that creates lasting change? To me, I was taught that, well, unless we properly release the fascia and properly get to the emotional holding patterns, they'll never change, or it'll be just temporary. But then I looked outside and saw, you know what? Some of those other therapists are doing good work and they don't care about the emotions. They don't know anything about finding fascia restrictions. So what's the universe of that? And I think some of the papers out there say some really nice things about it might be just altering the patient's sense of sensation, how they perceive their body. And now you've brought your awareness to them. Let's see if we can change the sensation. And that's what a touch is all about. It's one way to intervene.
Yeah. The most important part when I talk about manual therapy or massage from a marketing standpoint, and I'll try to get therapists to hone in from a business standpoint, like what is it they're selling? If they're working
Yeah.
on clients who are like sports, if that's kind of their niche market, they're thinking pain reduction and like increased mobility, higher performance. If they're working on people who are in chronic pain, who just need to be able to walk and sit and stand without discomfort and go through their daily life, there's a slightly different kind of marketing that goes with either. But in the end, I try to get them to understand that
Mm-hmm.
fundamentally, what we're really doing is selling touch. And there's a
Right.
really,
Right. I think the marketing piece.
go ahead.
Okay, and to jump off on the marketing piece, marketing can come off as a word that sounds so negative, but it's everything we need to do to be successful in helping people, as well as having a practice that's successful, right? I think that so. My seminars, I teach massage therapists, I teach physical therapists, I teach speech language pathologists. There is a part of the marketing about that you have to work with. For instance, a massage therapist bubble of them, how they think the public them, that, well, everything is done relatively undressed under a sheet with lotion or oil, and you're going to work the whole body top to bottom. There has to be a little bit of reframing of how you view yourself, and then educate the patient on how to change how they view you, or it's not going to work. Because I teach work that is not necessarily something we're going to do to the whole body. I can call what I do symptom specific. We're working with the neck pain. My patients don't come in to see me with the expectation that I'm going to work top to bottom, front to back. So it's a little less of a problem. But if you're a therapist who does, you in your own brain first to not as a massage therapist who does what everybody views as massage, but a massage therapist who has a license to touch. And if you're here for your neck pain, let's work with that neck pain. And are you okay if I spend the whole session working with that neck pain? And if not, I want to know right now, how do you want to part and parcel this session? Lay the groundwork, re-educate yourself, as well as re-educate your patients. The same thing's for physical therapists. Patients walk into my room and they look around and it's like, well, there's no exercise equipment. What's this all about? I'm a PT with I use manual to teach speech pathologists a lot of touch per se, but adding a layer of manual therapy to a speech and language pathologist evaluation and treatment session can be incredible for working on vocal dysfunction, swallowing dysfunction. We're talking about the same issues that all professions face. It's just taking those blinders off of what I think I can do and say, you know what, I'm here to help you move better. Are you okay if we try this? Right? And that's really what it amounts to me.
Yeah. There's so many nuances. It's really exciting to have the conversation with you and see it from your perspective, because it is slightly different, I think, maybe as a PT, also having the breadth and scope of practice, time, and the knowledge base that you have. But again and again, as I talk to you, for instance, when I came to you and would ask questions, I didn't come in with a lot of Thai theory. But one thing Walt did not do is he didn't say, Robert, all that stuff you studied in Thai massage, that's crap. What Walt said was like, Robert, listen, when it comes to pain science, because I had questions, he said, the fundamental is this. It doesn't really change anything about what we're doing in session as manual therapists. It changes why we think it works the way it does. And it was like, because that opened up a space where there was nothing I was doing that was wrong. It was just like, let's work on making it more correct.
No. Right. I think sometimes the words that can come out of our mouth are potentially wrong, potentially harmful even in a way, but you know what? I was guilty of the same crimes, if you will, right? It's not, I think of it as somewhat of a sanitizing of the thoughts that I think in the words, try and be less specific, right? And be a little bit more general, which is just the opposite direction. People come to us because of our specialty, our niche of what we can do for them. And people come into me saying, I heard you're really good at myofascial release, and I've tried to wash that away from people's thoughts is I'm actually really good at helping people in pain. If you really care what I do, I'll tell you it's myofascial release, but it's not going to be the myofascial release that a lot of people are taught. I use the words myofascial release because it represents a style of engagement that people have associated with myofascial release, right? Cross-handed work, that sort of thing, that engagement. It's a style of that rather than me believing that I'm singularly and selectively identifying fascia under the skin and able to somehow magically target that to the exclusion of everything else. But most people, that's what you believe, right? Somehow you can get rid of everything else, you get past everything else, and just treat that singular and target, whether it's a trigger point, fascia restriction, or cranial lesion, whatever it is. We think somehow we can do that. And then we go back and we retest and we say, oh, that's so much better. And the person feels better. And that validates our belief and narrative when in fact that it might have had nothing to do with it. I do warn people. I say, you know what? But it may not have anything to do with what I think I did. And I want you to know that up front. And a lot of people are a little uncomfortable for that, because if I'm the one that helps them, they want to say, Walt found the key, and all I did was find a way to bring their awareness to that area in a way that was helpful. And it's not about discounting our knowledge, right? But I don't want to sell you a bag of bad information about fascia or trigger points or inhibited or disinhibited muscles. Or there's so many narratives that people make a recipe work, right? You learn these things, you learn these tools and recipes, and people get better. And you think, boy, that's proof for my narrative. And probably not so at all. Sometimes even harder for patients to understand that you may not know exactly what's happening underneath the person's skin. But I let them know I'm not completely ignorant. I'll give them a couple different options of what might be happening in terms of what they think is wrong with them, which I don't like answering that question, but what I think might be happening when I treat. Ultimately, I make them understand that it's less about what I think might be wrong under their skin. It's like, well, what do you feel? Does I feel relevant? Does it feel familiar? Does it represent your experience? And not only that, does my touch feel like it might be helpful? And if there's anything about my touch that feels like it might not be helpful, we may need to modify it or change it or not do it. Because if part of your brain is thinking, boy, this might not be good for me, that's probably not a place we want to go.
It's sending off, in my world, the way I think of it is an alert signal. It's like either there's no effect or
Yeah,
danger. And I don't really want them to go into that place. When
right.
it's, let's say I use an elbow.
Yeah,
When it comes to pressure in my classes, some of the compressions I use can be very, very deep, but they can be intense in the sense that it gets the person's attention,
mhm,
but it's not supposed to feel painful.
right.
One of the things I've noticed in the entrepreneurs group, we have just about 6,000 members at this point, and we're just now starting to get people who are coming in and they're talking about pain science. And I'm going, okay, listen, I'm pro pain science. I'm pro whatever's going on in the pain science camp. I'm trying to understand what's going on. The real future as an entrepreneur is how do you
Right.
package and sell this to the public with a narrative that you like better?
Mhm.
Whew.
What was really, and I think that's where you and I, even though we were trained from very different camps, so to speak, and we speak a different language of our hands. There's a similarity of thought in not only how we think but how we act and teach, which I think is pretty cool. I a couple of years ago I was teaching a class, and in the pain science community with physical therapy, there's some therapists who do little actual what you might view as work, so to speak. They may not do a lot of exercise. They may not do a lot of stretching. They may not do a lot of manual therapy. A lot of their work is devoted to education, because education is a key component to pain science and really to a lot of the work that we do. Only we tend to educate with our hands more. And he came to my workshop, not because he wanted to become a master of it, right? He came to my workshop because he felt that simply sitting across the table with education met some patient's narrative of, okay, this is what's important to me, but there are other people who we seem to be missing. So we wanted to learn sort of a generic version of manual therapy, of touch therapy, of physical engagement, so he could then apply pain science principles in his practice. And he didn't need to take this tiered hierarchical type approach with me where you got to take 15 classes to be a master, which it works for some people, but I don't think it's necessary. We just taught him a way to integrate what he knew about pain science much better into touch, and how to make those two things work really well. And I may see him again in another workshop, but it's not mandatory, because he's got the skill. We have the education, we have the background, we have the training, we have the experience. And I don't think any of us need to take this multi-level marketing package of continuing ed, although a lot of people make a lot of money and a lot of people benefit from it. But I don't think it's necessary to become a really good and efficient and helpful therapist. So I think Robert and I are kind of on the same page there in terms of teaching not only the work, but what supports it, and make this work from a marketing and entrepreneurial standpoint.
When it comes to education, what I see over the years, it's been about 7 years that I've been focused more on education, and it's sort of shifted and changed over time. I just continue to put out information both online in like video format, YouTube videos, and then also in
Mm-hmm.
classes. And I just try to meet the students where they're at, because I can sometimes have a student who's been working over 10 years, and then I can have a student who just got out of massage school. Their perspectives and their questions are completely different. And it's increasingly just a challenge, a good challenge, but a
Mm-hmm.
challenge to meet them both where they're at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Some people
Again, that therapist with 10 years of experience. I missed that.
What about them with the 10
Say it
years of
again.
experience?
Okay, sorry. The therapist with 10 years of experience has just that 10 years, thousands of patients. It's like they're coming to you. What are you going to offer them? Are you going to offer them, you're going to give them the key to a new city, or you can sprinkle on some other ways to engage that person in a meaningful touch-based dialogue, right? That's what I love about my work, because I get newbies. I get therapists with decades of experience. I get therapists of massage therapists, PTs, speech pathologists, etc. They're coming in with a lot higher level of education, in some places experience. And it's like, what do I have to teach this person? I think what I have to teach this person is to include your patient in this model, right? Include your patient. And I don't care what you're doing. I don't care whether you're doing exercise or massage or MFR or Thai massage. include your patient to a greater extent in a way that empowers them to take real ownership in this process. And if I'm anything in this life, I really work toward that patient-directed model versus teaching myofascial release as the answer to everything. To me, MFR is my metaphoric way of reaching somebody. It's what I do with my hands. It's how I still brand myself, much to the chagrin of some people, that I still call what I do myofascial release. But again, it represents a style of engagement. And what really is important on the table is the dialogue I have with my patient, not to root out their inner emotions, but to get them into contact with, is what I just touched or stretched, does this touch? And I think it's our brain, to our tissues, to our central nervous system, everything else. That's probably the most meaningful part of the engagement that I can have with a patient.
Yeah. There were so many things when I took a class with you. And it was interesting because you and I were getting to know each other, like even in the class, because you don't know all of my background and I don't know all of yours. And we would do something and you'd come over and you kind of whisper at me like, Robert, is this similar to what you're doing? And I'm like, oh, Walt, this is just absolutely, like I do this similar stuff all the time. But a good educator, it wasn't just copying what you did. There was something about in education, and I see this with good teachers, it wasn't what you did, it was how you did it. It was how you structured the communication with the client. It was how you approach things, that the crack let a little light in. And I was like, oh, it's totally fine to take elements of what I learned as Thai massage and then realize, no, I'd been doing elements of what I consider myofascial release for years and years. I just didn't have that little framework for it.
Yeah, because I spread those apart. No, this is Thai massage, this is MFR, this is whatever. And, those camps aren't supposed to talk. But, I mean, let's face it, that we can only do so many things with our hands. And thank you for that compliment, by the way. I didn't want to let that go unmentioned, because I appreciate that. And I think that's really what I'm about, what my classes are about. It's that learning to how to seek connection with our clients in a way that you can make the engagement meaningful. And I know that sounds a little fuzzy, a little touchy-feely, but really, to me, it's understanding that it's about their perception of what we're doing, not me having a bag full of experience in this toolbox full of tricks that I'm going to use on you, but because the tricks are meaningless if my patient doesn't find it helpful.
It's like, I'm the therapist, you're the client. And it's like, no, we're just two people meeting up trying to figure it out. It's a different model.
Yeah. Or it is. Or at times even reversing that, right? There's times when, okay, so our patient's laying on the table. They're in that lower part of that relationship, right? They're laying on the table and we're standing over the top of them, telling what we think is wrong, we want to do. Structure is just this. I sometimes like flipping that around, dropping my stool down, asking them to sit up on the stool, letting them take the power position in the relationship, and not feeling like, okay, here's more of that white coat syndrome coming in where I feel like I'm disempowered. I think it can be huge. And I do think therapists take a lot of liberties, even with implied consent within a session, with some of the things that we say and do. And that's another thing I really push hard at therapists when they're taking my training, is basically, here's to tell a patient what you'd like to do, why you want to do it, and where you're going to put your hands, and then get permission. And it's really awkward at times to ask permission to do something with a patient. And I took liberties for years with myofascial release, the places I put my hands, because I thought it was for the greater good, and it was in a lot of ways, but I put my hands in places that patients may not feel is socially appropriate to do, and I don't do that anymore. I don't take those liberties. I don't necessarily feel like I have to work on the skin like I was taught, because in the MFR model, you have to be on the skin or you're releasing clothing. What about all those other modalities that work over clothing and they seem to do fine? That I don't have to put my patient with shame, right? If I ask them to be in a two-piece bathing suit and they're not comfortable with their body image, why would I want to set the relationship off in a negative way to begin with? It's not that I'm afraid to work on skin. There we go.
Yeah,
I have no idea where we left off. So
we're fine. We're fine.
yeah.
Um, I think a lot of it
Okay.
was discussing the narrative about how we're interacting with clients,
Yeah.
what we're doing, and then even discussing a little bit about like myofascial release and the marketing component of that. I can see and hear you just fine.
Okay. Repeat what you said because everything went blank.
Okay. I was saying that I think we were discussing myofascial release and the sort of narrative that we deal with clients. You talked about having clients undress. You know, you had to make
Right.
contact with skin,
Right.
otherwise you're releasing clothing.
Right. And again, I don't know where this is going to pick back up, but it's basically having that sense of respect for the patient and not forcing beliefs on them that they might not be comfortable with. They might not be comfortable as a human being getting less undressed or less dressed on my table while I do things. Some people think I make a too big a thing about this, that it's about the person getting better and et cetera, and it is, but without respecting that person's issues, if you will, self-consciousness or lack of self-consciousness. I think we're making assumptions and we're working too much from our own ego instead of acknowledging the patient's part of all this.
Yeah. Well, there was a young lady. I had a mom bringing her daughter. Her daughter had been 13 years old, and I have a home studio. I don't have a large professional office, signage, things like that. And I could tell because I can see through my double French doors, the blinds were open. I could tell they were in the car talking, and I knew they're talking, and they're like, "Is this the place? Like this is, it doesn't feel it's professional to go to someone's home."
Right.
I interacted with them. Her mother sat on the couch. Her daughter's fully clothed on my mat, and she's tiny. She's little. I didn't know exactly what I would be expecting out of this session. And as I talked with her daughter to find out, not just getting information from the mother,
Mm-hmm.
so including this 13-year-old in her own process. Hey, what's going on with you? And she's like, oh, my neck hurts. And just very gentle, mobilization. I'm engaging her,
Mm-hmm.
her mother, because her mother's like, well, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, her muscles in her neck feel kind of tight. And then we just continued to work. And the thing is, because she's so small, my sessions are typically 3 hours.
Duh.
She did not need 3 hours.
Right.
Even enough body mass space for me to work for 3 hours.
Right.
What I wound up doing was working for an hour. Her daughter had a very positive response. And I think that her mother was even more impressed because, I, as a professional, was including her daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're a 13-year-old, I'll tell you what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, we even cut the session short. It saved the mom money because she expected to pay a much larger fee. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, yeah, I think for today, I think she's totally fine. And she was
Yeah.
like, oh, my neck, oh, it feels so much better. Just these little light tractions and movements.
Right.
It doesn't look like all the sessions I do.
Right.
The session has to fit the client, and that's where, yes, training, education, give students, in my case, more information. But
Right.
the way that they're going to interact with tissue can be radically different from client to client, depending on the connection they're trying to form and
Mm-hmm.
that the client presents, including their emotions, their psychology, their mentality. If I get a guy who's a CrossFitter and he's 350 pounds, I mean, it's the bro, fist bump. We're going to change your oil. We're going to work on your adductors and your quads, and we're going to
Right.
help you up, let you
Right.
go out bolder.
Right. Right.
But the thing is, it still fits within, I feel, everything that you and I are discussing. It's always enlightening to have these conversations with you because I always feel like you're essentially discussing both from a marketing standpoint and from a professional standpoint as educators. You're always discussing the same thing, but it's always enlightening to see how you address it from a different perspective. That it really does for me. It provides a crack that lets some light in. It makes me look at my practice from a different angle. That is,
Mm-hmm.
it's highly beneficial. I used to I'd use an elbow You'd find an area, which now we'll generally laugh about and call it the frozen chicken.
Right. Right.
And I could move different directions, and the client would go, oh, and I'd go, ooh, there. But then you were the one, Walt, who said, okay, do you prefer this or this?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that little piece of communication,
Right.
putting the client in the driver's seat.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Use me as the tool was like golden.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I think it's huge, and I think it's what transforms a practice or a therapy from. A lot of people will take issue about me saying this, but being about the ego of what we've learned and turning it into that partnership, or even empowering that person more than what we do per se. I think that's key with all this work. And to me, the work gets simpler. The techniques that I use and teach, they're easy. I'm always modifying techniques. You can take additional trainings from me or anybody else. Sometimes I think additional trainings are less about all these layers of technique and experience. I think sometimes the additional training is almost the indoctrination into a narrative, the cementing in of the belief of that closed camp, that you then can spew that narrative to other people or write it on your website or teach it to people. And it becomes less about the things that we're doing with the patient than it is what we think is happening. And I'm rather cynical anymore about the modality empires and modality camps, et cetera. Not that you learn bad things, but I think there's a lot of things attached to a marketing style that is essentially profit driven for that person. Hey, we all make a profit from what we're doing, but if I need to get you to come back and continue training with me, I need to tell you some stories. I need to make this more complex than it needs to be. I need to create the sense that we're building super therapists within these therapy walls, or you're not going to keep paying me money per se. And to me, it's like, that's fine. You already know enough. Let's just sprinkle in a patient-directed modality or way of engaging, and I teach it via the style that resembles MFR, but you can use Thai massage or you can use whatever it is you want, and it all works really well.
Yeah. With students, I just continue to interact, and I am trying to build something as a brand from a marketing standpoint that is unique, these epic sort of 3-hour sessions.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't tell students, don't go study with traditional Thai massage teachers.
Right.
And I'll be very clear, like, listen, that's not what I do. I'm not personally interested in it, and I'm happy to talk about that without disparaging those teachers.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's like, it's not what I offer.
Right. Right.
But I don't want to tell you not to go study. So
Right.
in Thailand, one of my friends and colleagues here in Austin, he went to Thailand to study with Pichet. Pichet Buntum is a major master in Thai massage in Thailand. And when he came back to Austin, when he's talking with me at Thai Massage Jam, he said that Pichet would walk around and say, oh, dukkha, dukkha, which is suffering in Buddhism, by the way, dukkha. And he would tell little jokes because his English has gotten better over the years, but still a little broken. And it's like he kept saying, technique, 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 what to do, what to do, what to do. Because the students come from all over the world and they're looking for another technique. And they're looking what to do, and he's like, oh, dukkha, 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 like they don't get it.
Right.
Because I think in his own way, he is saying some of the same things that you and I are discussing in this interview, even as a Thai master of his work, where they're looking for another technique. And he's saying it's about awareness and it's about connecting with the person you're working on.
Yeah. And I know some of our private conversations, we've kind of shared our separation from our teachers who brought us to where we are, and how, the elevation of somebody when I teach somebody, if they go and teach it themselves, there's that sense of satisfaction that, I taught them enough that they feel accomplished to do this. And that's not always the case when you break from a past teacher, when you start changing the narrative. But you know what? There's a lot of good work out there, and whether it's in Thai massage or myofascial release, or I don't care your modality of choice. We're all going to grow. We're all going to learn new things. We're all going to bring it to our audiences in unique ways. And hopefully you and I are going to be known for maybe, kind of incorporating a lot more than just the traditional approach to Thai massage and myofascial release, and adding elements that I think create greater acceptance from the medical and the scientific community, instead of having to quote unquote educate them on the secrets of, in my case, the fascia. It's like, you know what? We're using the things that you, Mr. Doctor or Mrs. Whoever, already know. We're just incorporating with a touch approach. Then to me, that's hopefully if that's all we do in life, I think we've accomplished our goals.
People, when they look at my reviews on Yelp, or they look at my website and they're asking about what I do and how do I get, such good results, I have to laugh, because I am trying to ask these detailed questions about science. I went to public school in Louisiana. I don't know if people know much about Louisiana, but Louisiana's public schools are a little limited. Okay. I'm asking these deep questions, but in the end, what I do to a point feels archaic, in the sense that I jokingly tell people occasionally that I mash on people for a living.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I do. Now, the scientific description of what's happening when we make contact continues to change. That narrative evolves. And part of the reason I chose the name Reboot was because I was being boxed into this Thai massage box.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept studying and I kept growing, and they kept saying, no, you have to stay in this box. And I'm like, no, I don't. I can evolve. I choose to evolve. Reboot, my brand, is because it's about reinvention.
Right.
As science change, we continue to let it evolve. As we develop better practices, we let it evolve.
Right.
If I say something now and in 10 years from now, I figure out that's totally wrong, I change it.
Right.
I get to be the Madonna of the bodywork world. Every 10 months, I can change my style a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I would look at the first workbook and say, that's what I did. The second workbook and say, that's what I did. The third workbook. And I'm like, no, it's like Picasso. If you have a 30-year career, it changes over time.
Right. Right. Yeah, I agree. If you took my class a year ago, I'm going to sound different then than I do now, because you know what? I'm allowing information to filter in what I both do and teach here. And I think that's important. I actually got some criticism from some colleagues that, that sort of I'm constantly changing my mind about what's happening. And they were viewing that as somehow a negative or a limitation. And it's like, thank you. Yeah, I am changing my mind quite frequently. My goal is the same, but I'm integrating what's coming in from the research, what's coming in from our experience, what's coming in from our patient's experience, which is by the way, the three-legged stool of evidence-based practice, right? They're all important, and I'm evolving constantly, and I hope I continue to do that.
The sense of, I have such a crazy background. We're gonna have to do about 20 of these interviews.
Okay, all right.
The thing is, it's like it comes to a point. It's dangerously close. Like when you think of a modality,
right.
It comes dangerously close to having a guru.
Yeah.
And the guru tells you how it is. And the thing is, I eschew that thing because I really want the client and I really want my students to find their own truth,
right,
their own practice. I'm not trying to just replicate what I do infinitely. I'm
right.
trying to give it a brand. I'm trying to develop something distinct, in the sense that McDonald's is very distinct from Wendy's, even though they both sell hamburgers. I'm trying to build a distinct brand, but the students, they want a concrete answer. And it's like, I don't think human experience, especially when it comes to touch,
right,
interaction, communication, I don't think it's that simplistic. Part of the reason that the science is as limited as it is there are so many variables. It is very hard to isolate, and it's very hard or more challenging to research.
Right. And then we, therapists, teachers, etc., grab the pieces of it that support the narrative, and we simplify it into a recipe that we can teach and sell to each other. When, some might say, well, it's not as simple as that. But on the other hand, it's not as complex as everybody makes it seem. It's not as complex as understanding, well, gosh, let's do trigger point now. Tomorrow we'll do MFR, and then we'll follow it with Thai massage, followed by, all these other tools, those metaphoric tools that people pull out of their tool belts. Well, if you have an understanding of how the body works, it doesn't matter what tool you use. The language is clear. It's just we box ourselves in to have, okay, for this person, I'm going to pick this modality. And it works for some people. You can sell it. You can sell a menu of services, which is good for business, good for the person you work for. But if your understanding of real science, of real pain medicine, of real physiology and neuroanatomy and neurophysiology, if they're there, the tool doesn't matter. It really doesn't.
Yeah, it's completely different ways of interacting. The students, I can show them when it comes to a technique, I can show them something that is a lengthening, tractioning mobility.
Mm-hmm.
And I can show them something that's a specific compression. And they want to know, well, which one do I use? And I go, I don't know. How does the client feel?
Yeah. Yeah.
They're like, oh, come on. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, 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 no.
Yeah.
You know, each client is a little bit different. Like, and there's this dance.
Right.
It's like, because my sessions are 3 hours. As you go, well, how does the client feel? What's the communication like?
Yeah.
They'll laugh because when I do use a compression, sometimes the clients aren't as trained to communicate verbally about every time it's too much pressure.
Right.
So I tell them to watch for the ibrometer.
Mm-hmm.
When you press on someone and they go, you're like, you don't want the ibrometer to go off.
That's a good one. Yeah.
It's giving you, nonverbal communication about the pressure use. And when I do this and I go, oh, is it too much? And I back off. They're like, oh yeah, that's better.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's just a nuance, because on a part of it, it's like, it's business building, it's practice building, it's education, it's science, it's intellect.
Right.
But then there's such a strong part where it's feeling and connection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's this artistic dance that evolves over time.
Yeah. And again, some may think that moving into a more science-based or science-explained narrative takes you away from that artistic sense. And I think it's just the opposite. I still see the art of human interaction happening every time I touch. And you talked about using that pain scale. I love using the pain scale or the pressure scale, but I add a second part to it, right? We're doing something. I put pressure into the person. I might think it's light. I might say, okay, right now, 0 to 10, how much pain am I replicating? Hopefully it's not hurting them. It's replicating a familiar aspect of their experience. It's taken to the edge of awareness, maybe of a pain, or maybe it's just interpreted as pressure, right? Those pressure or pain scales 0 to 10 are supposed to be objective, but they're completely subjective, right? Because we do something with someone, I engage them and I say 0 to 10, how much pain are you feeling or how much pressure are you feeling? They're going to give me a number. They're going to say 4. Well, to me, 4 should mean, well, that's not a whole lot. We must be safe. But I know enough to know that I don't know what they're feeling. I know what that's supposed to mean, but I don't know what you're feeling. So I'm going to ask you a second layer of questions here. Let's say it was a 4 on the pressure scale. I'd say, how much would you stop me at? That's the question that really frames the relationship properly. And somebody may completely distract the conversation and say, oh, it's okay, I can take it, which I hate those words, by the way. I don't care if you can take anything. 0 to 10, what number are you feeling? And 0 to 10, what number do you think would be too much? And if I'm bumping anywhere near close to that, I want to back away because I don't want to provoke you, right? Whether you think you can take it or it's necessary to take it, I prefer not to do that. And I take those pain/pressure questions, the 0 to 10, what do you feel right now? What would you stop me at then? And that used to be my stopping point. As long as we're okay, then that it's okay to treat, right? We're only 50%, we're okay. Now I say, okay, does it feel like what I'm doing right here might be helpful or useful? And some people immediately know yes, and some people look at you like, I don't have a clue. You're the expert. You're supposed to tell me, is this helpful or not? And there's times where I refuse to answer that because they may not know if it feels helpful or potentially helpful. But if they don't know, I'm going to reverse the question and said, is there anything about what I'm doing that feels like it might be harmful? Because if there's anything in your brain that's the little warning, that little alert sign is going up, then we need to stop it immediately. It's taking that sense of patient ownership of the process to a degree that most patients aren't used to. And I laugh sometimes because so many modalities are about silent work, about letting the patient process and think and feel and maybe emote. And yeah, I'm not going to be constantly bombarding my patients with dialogue or questions, but I really want to know what you're feeling. what are you feeling, right? And I ask the question just like that. What are you feeling? Not, are you feeling this or do you feel that? But what are you feeling? Which is a very open-ended question, which is what I prefer, because you never know what you're going to come back. It's a very simplistic way of dialoguing with somebody, which is not about dragging them out emotions or anything like that, but it's making sure that your touch feels relevant and safe to the patient. And that's where I establish the boundary of protection in every relationship with a client.
Yeah. The work that I do, because it's mat based, myself and the client are clothed. There's lots of passive body contact. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like very similar in ways to what you're doing, but I'm using my legs, my feet, my knees. I mean, it looks like Brazilian jiu-jitsu at point. There's all these joint locks and I'm pulling, tractioning, doing all these complex things. And I tell the clients, I tell the students in class, I'm like, listen, fundamentally, when I'm working with people, sometimes the compressions can be deep.
Mm-hmm.
It's not supposed to be painful. I want the client to feel, and I'll tell them this, I want them to feel like a baby wrapped in mama's arms.
Right, right. I
Safe.
think I think it's possible to work deeply,
Yeah.
but gentle at the same time, right? Versus deep and aggressive. Although I cynically say I doubt if there's any therapist out there who will say that they're working aggressively. Most therapists will say, "Oh no, I'm working within my patient's tolerances." But how much of that is really derived in a true objective way from the patient, and how much of it is what you teach them what's necessary, or almost what you teach them to take, because it's the process that you're using. And we can't ever be completely knowing whether patients are telling us the truth or not. But I find it a great compliment for some people to say to me, you know what, it feels like you're working deeply, but I'm not. This doesn't bother me at all. It feels good. And that's the kind of compliment I want, versus the here, bite on this stick while I carve this pain out of you, which is an inherent aspect of a lot of the work that we do. And to me, that's very troublesome. I'm not saying you don't get benefit from that or the therapist doesn't see results, but you know what? I'm a baby when I'm on the table. I don't want to be given a stick to bite on, and you better not hurt me or make my pain or my warning sensors go up, because it's going to be the last time I pay you money to beat the snot out of me.
It's in the end, it's all about the client and then what can the client receive. Because I
Right,
tell them, I'm not a battering ram.
right,
This is not the warthog headed battering ram from the Lord of the Rings.
right.
What I'm doing is I'm going up to the door and I go, knock, knock. Hey,
Yeah,
can I come in? And if they say no, then I just hang out outside the door and just go, hey, what's going on out here?
yeah.
The interaction, it's like, do I use a mobilization? Do I use a compression? I don't have an answer to that, and it drives the students mad.
Yeah, yeah,
But it's like having a conversation with someone for the first time over coffee. What do you talk about? There's no script. You
yeah.
have to connect with the person.
Right. I think one of the reasons I like you, Robert, one of the reasons that I think we get along is we both are strong users of analogy and metaphor when we talk, when we teach, and when we treat. And I think it's really useful as long as you don't overplay the metaphors or overplay the analogies to the point where it gets into bad explanations or bad science. But I love using that. And I think we're a lot alike there, even though we do very different. At least the names of our modalities are very different, but I think underneath it, it's really quite similar. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And fundamentally, there's only so many ways.
to touch.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
There's so many, like, students come in and they think, oh, there's some sort of magic,
yep.
formula. There's some sort of Asian, and I'm like, no, 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 no. I don't think that's how it works at all. I don't think that's not even having it that way
Hmm.
creates a sort of ivory tower and a barrier of entry that I'm not interested in fostering. Tonight, I run Thai Massage Jam here in Austin. Thai Massage Jam is a community bodywork event. The public comes in, students come in, LMTs come in, whoever, yoga teachers,
Right.
and I just work with them and share for 5 hours in a group setting where we work on each other. People come in with physical problems, and
Hmm.
I or somebody else works with them. A student comes in, they want education, and the thing is, as a therapist, even being licensed, it started to ivory tower the work where it was like, no, a husband and wife can come in and learn how to work on their own intimacy,
Yeah.
their own touch, and the fact that, oh, his shoulders are tight. Well, listen, let me show you real quick. I'll show you how you can work on that.
Right.
Empowering them.
Right. It's wonderful. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you so much for doing this first interview. I'd love to do some more over time.
I
And
think
then
it'll happen.
what sort of topics you'd like to go over.
Yeah.
But can you give people just a little bit of information about how they can connect with you? I'm going to put links down below the YouTube video. How would they get in touch with you, or MedBridge, take classes with you?
Yep. Oh, before I go into that too, is leave some comments here in the comment sections about if there's anything else you'd like to see us dialogue about, chat about, right?
Yeah.
Okay, the easiest way to reach me is my website, Rochester. I'm sorry, that's my practice website, foundationsandmfr.com or waltfritz.com. They all take you to my website. I have an extensive blog where if you like what you heard from me here today, then you'll like what I have to say on the blog. My website is linked to my YouTube channel. I also have online trainings available through MedBridge Massage. Go to my website, click the link, and you'll get some discounts there off of an excellent package of continuing education, not just by me, but from a lot of really good quality educators. And what else we got going on? I think that's about it. I've got classes scheduled around the United States. I'm in Australia next February teaching 4 seminars. I might be going to Hong Kong next August to teach a class, all over the place. So if you are interested, check out the website, check out where I'm teaching. Some of the classes may not seem appropriate depending on your profession, but yet they're all geared to therapists who touch, no matter what your title. And I hope to hear from you in the future. And Robert, thanks a lot for having me here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Walt.
Yeah.
Listen, have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.
Great. Thanks.